For 15 years, I swept, scrubbed, and mopped the floors of a prestigious tech firm in downtown. I started when I was 18, fresh out of high school, desperate for any job that could pay the bills. The office was high-end, polished, and constantly busy, people in suits rushing through sleek hallways, buzzing with the hum of productivity. It was always a world I admired from the outside, one I didn't belong to, but I worked silently, efficiently, and unnoticed, doing what I knew best, cleaning. I was one of those invisible workers, the janitor, the cleaner, the one who was always there, but never acknowledged. Every morning at 5 a.m., I entered the building before anyone arrived and left after the last person had gone home. The office was mine to clean, to make spotless for the next day, while the world of high-paying execs and tech moguls ran in its fast-paced rhythm. The sharp, sterile floors reflected the ambition of the people who worked above me. I often wondered what it would be like to be part of that world, but I never thought much about it. I had a job to do. The CEO, James Palmer, was the epitome of corporate power. A Harvard graduate, in his mid-40s, he had the confidence of someone who believed the world owed him everything. He never noticed me, or if he did, he never showed it. To him, I was just another nameless face, another worker whose job was to stay out of sight, out of mind. But over the years, I learned a lot. I noticed the way the executives manipulated their employees, how the company culture turned toxic, how they played people like pawns in a game of profit. I heard the whispers in the hallway, the complaints about how the lower-level employees were treated, how the benefits were shrinking, and how the board pushed for greater profits at the expense of everyone else. And then there were the conversations between James and his close circle. I overheard them talking about firing employees to boost profits, about taking bonuses while cutting paychecks. It was a world I saw, but never truly lived in. It wasn't right, but I stayed quiet. After all, I had bills to pay, and I was just the janitor. However, everything changed when I learned something that shook me to my core. The company was in financial trouble, struggling to keep up with competitors. The CEO had been making reckless decisions, pouring money into failed projects, and keeping employees in the dark about the company's dire straits. I knew something had to give, and this time, it wasn't going to be me. One day, I came across a file on James' desk. It wasn't meant for my eyes, but curiosity got the best of me. I read through documents, emails, and financial reports. What I found confirmed what I had suspected all along. The company was bleeding money, and James had been taking out loans under the table to cover up his mistakes. The entire board was complicit, but James was the ringleader, the one pulling the strings. I knew I had to act. I had been cleaning their floors for years, but it wasn't just the floors I was going to clean up anymore. I had spent years quietly building my own wealth, investing wisely, learning the inner workings of business and finance. I had been building something on the side, using the knowledge I gathered from working in the shadows. The next day, I arrived at work as usual, but I wasn't just the janitor anymore. I walked into James' office, greeted him with a smile, and handed him a file, one that detailed the company's financial discrepancies, the fraudulent dealings, and the reckless management of funds. I watched his face turn pale as he flipped through the documents. "I think it's time for a change," I said calmly, "and I'm going to make it happen." James sputtered, his voice rising in panic. "What are you talking about?" I smiled again. "You see, I didn't just clean your floors all these years. I own this company. And as of today, you're fired." His face drained of color, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. It was a moment I would never forget, the moment I went from invisible to the one in control. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about righting a wrong. For years, the people at the top had taken everything they could while walking all over those beneath them. I had worked hard, quietly, in the background, doing the work no one else wanted to do, learning, listening, observing. Now, it was my turn to take the reins. The board was shocked, but they didn't have much say. I had invested in the company under a pseudonym, gradually buying up shares until I was the largest shareholder. The power had always been in my hands, I just had to make the right move at the right time. The first thing I did was fire James Palmer. I brought in a new CEO, someone who believed in fair treatment for employees, who valued transparency, and who understood the importance of ethics in business. And as for me, I stayed in the background as I always had. But now, I wasn't the one scrubbing the floors, I was the one deciding who got to walk on them. The company thrived under new leadership, and the employees felt the change. I had cleaned their floors for 15 years, but in the end, I cleaned up their mess. Sometimes, the people you least expect have the most power. You just have to be patient, and wait for the right moment to reveal it. Things had changed drastically since the day I fired James Palmer, and took over the company. I still remember the moment I walked out of James' office, feeling a sense of relief knowing I had shifted the entire world, that I once only watched from a distance. But what I didn't expect was that this change wasn't just a personal victory. It set off a massive wave that affected not only the company but also myself. When I sat in the boardroom with the directors, even though they were the ones I had just overthrown, I could see the confusion in their eyes. They looked at me like I was a stranger, an outsider, even though I was now the largest shareholder and the one making the final decisions. I wasn't the standout in the room, I didn't wear the expensive suits they did, but I had power. And that power didn't come from being an heir or a wealthy individual, but from everything I had built, the knowledge I had quietly gathered over the years. The moment James was fired, I didn't just get the company back on track, I also decided to implement sweeping changes. I started by changing policies for employees. I knew I had to do something to ensure that everyone would feel respected and treated fairly. People like me, the ones who worked behind the scenes, the ones who were never mentioned in board meetings, had been forgotten for too long. Now, I wanted them to be seen as an essential part of the company. For the lower-level employees, I raised wages, improved benefits, and opened up more opportunities for advancement. I held meetings to listen to their concerns, and worked directly with teams to address the issues they were facing. I wanted them to see that this company didn't just belong to the people sitting in the executive offices, but to everyone who had worked hard to help the company survive and thrive. As for the board of directors, I decided to clean house completely. The people who had sat next to James in those powerful chairs, the ones who had witnessed the cruelty of how employees were treated, it was time for them to go. I didn't leave any trace of them behind in the company. Those who remained would be the ones with a long-term vision and the right values. Although these changes brought positive results within the company, I knew that there were still a few people trying to push back against me. The old shareholders, the ones who felt their power was being threatened, started raising voices in opposition. They couldn't accept that someone like me, a person without a strong family background, without any real reputation in the business world, was now leading the company. One of the larger shareholders tried to convince me to step down and look for a new CEO, someone with more prestige, to lead the company.